Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Fastidious, petulant perhaps, but has Brexit also revealed the British to be pompous? Surely not. Here's German journalist John Jungklausen's soapbox.
Rule, Britannia! Haha, hear the British lion roar. And of course, when it looks as dignified as the Queen, or as funky as Meghan and Harry, you rest assured the rest of the world is listening. But when it comes to politics, and more specifically to Brexit, I think it's quite clear it's the British lion who has to do some listening. I spent half my life in this country, but Brexit has brought out something in the Brits that I hadn't encountered before. A kind of national egotism and a vanity. Everywhere there's talk about the EU wanting to punish Britain. What's that all about? You leave the club, that's fine. But if the rest of the member states then want to decide among themselves what to do next, you think they're out to get you. Really? You talk about no deal until the cows come home. But if the EU only mentions no deal, your Brexit minister gets all flustered and writes angry letters. This is not just about you, Britain. This is about the future of Europe too. In the last 18 months, endless lineups of pompous Brexiteers have warned German car manufacturers that no deal would mean armies of newly unemployed workers in Stuttgart and Wolfsburg as UK sales plummet. What a load of nonsense. Because you know what? These markets are far more complicated than such black and white scenarios imply. Not everything is about you, Great Britain. Europe isn't out to get you. They have other things to think about on the continent, not just Brexit. So you should just get over yourselves and stop being so self-obsessed.
Well, John Jungklausen joins us now in the studio, protecting himself here on my left. Are you a pompous Brexiteer, Anne-Marie Trellian?
Well, I hope I'm not pompous. I am a Brexiteer. I'm half French. My mother's French. I'm a great lover of Europeans and all things European. And for me, Brexit is about trading relationships and a different relationship with our European neighbours. But I will continue to love them all, as I always have done.
But has it been self-obsessed, the argument, the Brexiteer argument going forward, and actually totally mischaracterises the way the rest of Europe is feeling?
Well, I don't know. When I'm in European countries, I talk very honestly about my view that I would like my country no longer to be in the EU. But that doesn't negate all the other relationships that the United Kingdom and European countries have.
Aren't you being a bit rude, John? I mean, pompous. You're saying that we're self-obsessed. That this is vanity.
There was a very good example for this. Was last summer when, after the Paris bombings, the EU introduced new security measures, which led to long queues at the European airports. And every single newspaper and media outlet in this country, including the BBC, were convinced that the Europeans were doing this, that thousands of Europeans were quite happily standing in queues at airports to punish the Brits. And that's the kind of, that's the self-obsession.
I wouldn't say
that's the self-obsessed sort of nature of the
no one ever
debate.
wrote to me complaining about that.
But how did you feel? I mean, it was actually one of the issues that was brought up. It was deliberately punishing Britain because of Brexit. I mean, do you think the EU is, through these negotiations, punishing Britain?
Well, no, but I think that is a very strange perspective. That's the media's,
It's not just the media. It's not just the media. Politicians lined up too.
Well, I wouldn't have done. I mean, I think the reality is that everyone understands that the security threat, was a problem. The Schengen Agreement made it very much more difficult for individual European countries to manage their security.
There are certainly no politicians who made the point that you're making now.
Well, I think that's very sad because, honestly, as someone who travels a lot, I've noticed that, the reduction in the kind of Schengen fluidity between borders, and that's completely fine. Honestly, I find Schengen quite an unnerving thing. I'm very glad we never signed up to it for that very reason.
All right.
But I think that's sad if that use of those changing, particularly when it's security environments, have caused those sorts of aggressive commentary when that genuinely isn't, what it should be about.
But there are people who would say, why shouldn't?
To the Europeans.
Oh, well, you have an apology here on air. I mean, there may be some people who feel, why shouldn't the EU punish Britain. If Britain wants to leave, these are negotiations. Shouldn't they be making it difficult?
Well, I think the EU's starting point is if you no longer want to be a member of the club, you will no longer enjoy all of its benefits. And I think that is a perfectly rational starting point. If you were a member of a golf club or a tennis club or a political party, you have certain benefits that are derived from that membership. So I certainly think they want to discourage other member states from going down that particular track. But I also agree with John that there are different things going on in Europe. For example, in Italy, where there's a general election coming up, there's a big talk about the refugee crisis and how that has affected Italy. In Germany, the discussion has obviously been how do they form a government, which has been the number one priority.
So they've got other things to think about,
Brexit,
sure.
of course, is a priority here because there is a lot of uncertainty for business and there are risks to our economy if we get the wrong deal and if we cast ourselves adrift from our closest trading partners.
So why is Labour pursuing a "let's have our cake and eat it" policy, which were the words used by
Wouldn't you
Rebecca,
like to have your cake and eat
by
it?
Rebecca Long Bailey? So that is the policy that they are trying to pursue by not being clear about membership of the single market or the customs union.
Well, my view is that the economy has to come first and that we are more deeply integrated with the rest of the European economy than we are with any other economy around the world. For example, Airbus make planes. The wings are made here in the UK. They are taken over to France, where they are put together with parts from Germany. We have integrated supply chains. If there is disruption to those supply chains, that could cause us great difficulties for jobs and investment and the wider economy. And this isn't scaremongering. These are issues that companies have been raising with the government and others for quite some time now, and it's something we need to get a handle on.
What did you think then when Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, said leaving the EU means you leave the single market?
Well, not necessarily. Factually, that I don't agree with him.
Right. Factually, he's wrong because you would cite Norway, for example.
Yes.
Right. And you don't agree with him anyway, but he's rejected Nicola Sturgeon's plea to support the UK staying in the EU single market ahead of her government publishing this analysis, which is saying that this is the way to go forward for a least damaging Brexit. Should he be in talks with the SNP?
Well, I think the SNP are ploughing their own furrow, quite frankly.
It's one you agree with.
Well, yes, but one of the things that the SNP want to do is somehow have a completely different agreement for Scotland than the rest of the UK. And Scotland, thankfully, is still part of the UK, and therefore they will be part of the UK deal because that is the case.
Should he have rejected those meetings out of hand, Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, that's entirely up to our party leader, and I respect his decision if he has other things that are pressing. As I say, I do think the SNP have got their own priorities, and I think they are different to ours with regard to trying to create a situation whereby they have their own arrangements, which I just think is untenable given that they are part of the UK.
Right, but they are clear about what they want.
Yes, she has been clear. She's always clear about what she wants.
Right. Has Jeremy Corbyn been totally clear about Labour's policy?
I would like to see a different approach, but I respect the approach that he is taking. And I think there is some discussion, in the Labour Party right now as to exactly what our approach should be. I don't think we should be taking these things off the table. That's my position.
What do you think about the idea of a second referendum in the way that Nigel Farage entertained?
No, thank you.
Not ever, not in any circumstance.
I think, we had a referendum. It was in our manifesto. We had it. The British people gave a spectacularly resounding vote. 17.4 million people voted to leave. The government has taken that message very clearly and is driving forwards, leaving the EU, which is what we're doing. Members, of Parliament are speaking. I think one of the interesting things about having a much more balanced House of Commons than perhaps was expected following the June election is that the voices are genuinely being heard from across the House, and the deal will reflect the British people in a way that we actually should be really proud of. So I'm very comfortable with you, and we do not need to do anything. We are driving forwards what was asked for last year in the referendum.
Do you think Brexit will actually happen?
Yes, I do.
In terms of the second referendum, Emily Thornberry said it would have to be a 90% of public opinion would have to swing behind the idea of a second referendum. Is that too high for you?
Well, let me put it another way. I agree with her that I don't think that there is a public appetite right now for a second referendum. It was quite a scarring experience, I think. It was quite a divisive thing, and I certainly don't want to see more of Nigel Farage on telly.
Right. OK. Well, that's fairly clear. What do you make, John, of the sort of spectacle, if you like, of different British politicians all lining up to see Michel Barnier, the EU's chief negotiator, in trying to, in some way, influence him in the future negotiations?
Well, that's part of what was, I guess, the British aim was to divide and conquer, I guess, to try and, because there are 27 member states, 27 parliaments who have to ratify whatever agreement they reach in the end. And of course, Barnier is Barnier, by the way, not Barnier. That's
Oh, are you telling me off my pronunciation?
Barnier, Monsieur Barnier, has perhaps not the strongest set of characters facing him across the table from the representing the British government. So for him to sound out a wider set of British politicians, I think is very sensible.
Right.
Talking about Mr. Davis, who claimed that there were impact assessments, and then Minister.
Yes.
David Davis. There are 58
Easiest
impact
thing in the
assessments.
world
Oh,
is-
no, there aren't.
Well, let me break up
Sorry.
this little thing. Would you like to be a fly on the wall when Anna Soubry and Dominic Grieve, your colleagues, go to see Michel Barnier? Is that
I'm
correct?
sure Monsieur Barnier will be thrilled to welcome Messrs Grieve and Soubry to hear their perspective.
All right. Vielen Dank.
Sehr gern.